Hi, so welcome everyone. It's really great to see everyone here this morning. Thanks so much for joining. This is the Circular Economy session. It's the fifth in our Countdown to COP series of monthly events, trying to identify actions and activities that we can do collectively and individually to achieve a zero carbon society. And so this Countdown to COP Circular Economy event is being organised by Transition Chesterfield, Chesterfield Climate Alliance, Derby Climate Coalition and Derbyshire Climate Coalition. And it's very relevant to Transition Chesterfield, who run our monthly repair cafe, and hopefully we'll hear from Margaret a little bit later on about that. So the circular economy is definitely a subject that we are hearing a lot more about, and more people are starting to kind of understand a little bit more about. But it's something that's really important, especially when you look at kind of the things like the stats around in Chesterfield, for example, like only 44% of household waste is reused, recycled or composted, and about 69% of household waste is comparing to so the Friends of the Earth are saying that 68% of waste in Chesterfield should be reused, recycled or composted by 2030, according to the Climate Change Committee, which advises the government. And 100% of all waste in Chesterfield should be reused, recycled or composted by 2030, according to Friends of the Earth. So it's a really important kind of subject, really. So we've got three fantastic speakers today, and thank you so much to them for joining us. So just before I introduce the first speaker, if you have any questions at any point, if you just write them in the chat box, and if you put a Q and then your question, and we'll save all the questions until the end, and I'll ask people to voice their questions for the purposes of the recording. And so each speaker will have about 10 minutes each for their presentations. And so, so we can start with Rosemary. So I'll introduce Rosemary. So Rosemary Horry, she's the Senior Lecturer in Environmental Management at University of Derby. She's been involved with environmental education for the last 20 years, returned to the university from industry, and now works to educate people on sustainability. She's recently been seconded onto the Decarbonise project, which I'm sure she'll talk to you more about working with businesses to reduce their carbon. So Rosemary is going to be giving us a talk all about the circular economy and just a little bit more about it, and give a bit of context to this session today. So thanks so much, Rosemary, and I'll pass over to you. You can start sharing your screen.
Okay, thank you, Craig. Brilliant. Thanks for inviting me here. I'm really happy to be here this morning to talk to you about circular economy. So hopefully sharing the slides will work, and I'll get this presentation running okay. So, okay, share. Just let me know that you can actually see this when it, can we all see this?
Yeah.
Hooray! It worked, apart from the fact I've now got my pictures in the middle of my circular economy bit. Well, as Greg said, I work at the University of Derby. That's our glorious, I think that's North Tower by the looks of it. And I've been seconded to a decarbonisation project, which is looking at these issues for businesses and seeing how we can actually help businesses to reduce their carbon footprint and reduce their use of resources. But we did this. Looking back at the posters in the war, we did this. We were saving scraps, we were saving gasoline, we weren't wasting anything, and something along the line went wrong. Because if we were doing all that then, what happened? Why did we stop? So I started to think, well, when did we become so wasteful? When did we start putting all this waste into landfill sites and dumping it on Brighton beaches? And this idea that we just take resources, make them into something and then throw it away. So I was pondering this and going, well, okay, it all went wrong. I'm assuming it went wrong somewhere around the 80s. So I can put my hand up as being in the 80s, and therefore I'm part of the problem and hopefully part of the solution. The ideal model for this if I go to Ella MacArthur, because obviously she's a great source of wisdom in terms of circular economy. And we look at this lovely diagram, which explains it quite nicely, that you go through this idea of manufacturing into the consumer, us, members of the public, but then rather than just throwing it away and getting rid of it, we're actually going back through and reusing the materials, either through anaerobic digestion and the production of biogas, or taking materials back and recycling them into another product. We can actually keep things within the system rather than getting rid. And surely that has to be better. And it's very much based on a nature idea. This, within nature, nothing gets wasted. Plants die, they get reused. Animals die, they get reused. So this is just really taking that natural approach and applying it to how we live. But we were quite good at doing this, because if we look at the brewing sector, traditionally the waste went to cattle food and good old Marmite, because I am a Marmite fan. I know many of you may not be, but I'm there supporting them. And the wastewater can be purified and released. So brewing was doing quite well. Okay, there's a lot of waste, but there's also a lot of research going on in this area. There's a company called Evergreen in the States who were looking at reusing the spent barley and turning it into a very healthy flour, which comes with all sorts of health benefits, including reducing the cases of cancer and all sorts of exciting things. From brewing, you also get something called hop trub, which is spent hops. Now, it has quite a bitter taste, so they were reluctant to put it in animal food because they didn't think any animals would eat it. But guess what? Pigs will. And then the spent yeast. It's got prebiotic properties, which, we all hear about how important prebiotics are now to our digestion. So it's good for us. So again, another product we can actually use. And if anybody's interested, Raquel et al. Produced a paper on this, utilisation of brewery waste in the food industry. And there is loads of opportunity and things that they're looking into. And that's just brewing. Spent grain can go into bread production. There's no reason it can't. So if we can do it with the brewing industry, surely we can do it with other industries. It just requires a bit of thought. Now, of course, I'm going to bring them up, aren't I? We couldn't have a meeting without talking about Amazon and the fact that they've been in the news for the 124,000 items per week that are destroyed. Why? Why are they chucking this stuff? Well, I don't think it's just Amazon. I think there are going to be a lot of companies out there who could be guilty of this. And it comes down to that bottom line on the spreadsheet, the fact that it makes economic sense because they're not returning product overseas and they're not having to sell their valuable product at a discount, which therefore devalues their products. So while it makes economic sense, ethically and morally, I have severe concerns about it. It's fundamentally wrong to waste valuable resources. We have one planet, we've got to take care of it. But while Amazon is named at the top of the slide, as I say, they won't be the only one. They just happen to be the one that's been caught. So I think we need to be aware of where we're buying materials, who we're buying from, and that we actually assess, as far as we can, how they behave, whether they are an ethical organisation, whether they do think about their waste and help protect the planet. What we're doing at the University of Derby? Well, we're trying to work with the local community. We want to be engaged. We are the only university in Derby and Derbyshire, and it matters to us. We do care about the local community. So we're involved with an ERDF funded project, which is a European funded project, which runs until November 22. And we're encouraging SMEs to think about their processes and their waste products. We're engaging with waste contractors, for example, Wards. Wards do an awful lot of work with us about closed loop systems and working with businesses to improve their circularity. So improving the way that they're using those resources and making sure that they're protecting the planet. So that's it in a nutshell. Thank you for listening. That's me, Rosemary Horry, r.e.horry@derby.ac.uk, and the email for the decarbonisation project. So if anybody knows any SMEs in Derbyshire, please point them in our direction. We'd love to help them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rosemary. That's really, really, really great. And we'll definitely be able to, kind of expand on things as we move on to the discussion in a bit. So thanks a lot. And so I'll now introduce the next speaker, which is Martin Hyde. And Martin is the policy lead for Comply Direct Limited. And they're one of the UK's largest packaging compliance schemes. And Martin's responsible for keeping customers up to date with ongoing changes in policy and legislation relating to environmental compliance. So, and I know he has a big passion for circular economy. So I'm really great to have Martin here. So thanks a lot for joining us, Martin. And over to you.
No problem at all. No worries. Is my screen actually sharing properly this time? Excellent. Yeah. So hi everyone. So I'm Martin. The company I work for, really, overall, we're an environmental consultancy, but I specialize in kind of packaging and waste electricals legislation. But today, what I wanted to cover was a bit about how packaging recycling in the UK actually works, because for most people, don't really see much further than when the waste actually leaves the household. So it's interesting to see how that's funded, and there is a lot of change coming in that area, which hopefully is good news for a lot of people. But yeah, we'll get into it. So I'll be talking about how the system's managed at the moment, how businesses, or producers as we refer to them in the system, have obligations, what changes are coming to those obligations, and then what impact that's going to have on consumers, and general householders. So, apologies. So, in terms of how packaging is recycled and funded in the UK, there's really three main streams of funding. So primarily is local authority council tax payments. So when you pay council tax as a householder, a portion of that money will be allocated towards waste, and that will pay for contracts between each local authority and a waste provider, or maybe the local authority runs their own waste disposal network. The issue that we have with that at the moment is that each local authority has a lot of freedom and a lot of contracting independence there. So most authorities operate different systems. So you have what we refer to as a bit of a postcode lottery of recycling. So different places can recycle different things in curbside. And then the other two ways that packaging recycling is funded kind of split somewhat. So firstly, there's producer payments. So any business who handles packaging has to pay money through the purchase of a packaging recovery note, or a PRN. Now what that means, a PRN, is that 1 ton of a material has been collected and recycled or exported for recycling overseas. So that once again contributes towards the value of the material. So rather than being a direct funding for the actual collection and the sorting, it just covers the actual cost of recycling the material in a facility. And then finally, there's business privately funded collections. So if you operate a business, you will likely have a contract with another business to collect and take your waste away. So I wanted to focus on the producer obligation side of things, because that's the bit that most people are completely unaware, to be honest, that this system even exists. So effectively, any business that's placing packaging on the UK market, they have this responsibility to pay towards the cost of recycling that packaging waste. And as I mentioned on the previous slide, that's done through the purchase or production of a packaging recovery note, or a PRN. So if 1 ton of paper or cardboard material is taken to a recycling facility and then it's recycled, the recycler will get some money by selling the material afterwards. Otherwise, they, if there's no value in the material, they wouldn't be able to operate as a recycler. And they'll also be able to sell the evidence that they've done that recycling to a company who needs the evidence, who needs the PRNs, which will give them a little bit of extra money to kind of bridge the gap. So each material has its own stream, so paper, plastic, glass, aluminium, steel, wood, and then there's one called general recycling, which just covers the little bit of gap between average recycling targets. Now, the way this works commercially is that the price of a PRN will vary throughout the year. So it's effectively traded like any other commodity on an open market, and there's various brokers and people who buy and sell them. So for example, for the business I work for, we represent around 1,600 businesses. It works out, I think, at around 10% of the obligated businesses in the UK. So we have a small team of people who'll be trying to buy these at the best price, basically, and ensuring, most importantly for us, that the recycling is genuine. And our current focus, obviously, is UK sourced. We're trying to move away from exports because of the issues we've seen, with news reports from places like Turkey, where we've seen dumping and fly tipping of UK waste. But the price that is paid for one packaging recovery note will vary depending on the kind of scene for recycling at that moment. So, as an example, back in 2019, the start of the year, plastic recycling was going really, really well. And the price for 1 ton of one plastic PRN, was between the 50 to 60 pound per ton level. So that money was helping reprocessors to bridge the gap. In 2019, there was then a massive shortage of plastic recycling. A lot of countries stopped accepting waste from the UK, and including China, and that led to there not being enough evidence. So we quickly saw the price of those PRNs going into the hundreds of pounds. So what that meant is, in turn, more businesses started recycling them. So more recycling happened because they're worth more money, and then the price started to come down again. So in a way, the system should operate some form of equilibrium. But as with all things, it has its own inefficiencies. It's been around for a long time, and it's done a good job of being a competitive system that kind of puts some money back into recycling and drives that cost. But what it doesn't necessarily do is take into account anything other than a materials kind of core group, so plastic, paper, aluminium, steel, glass, etc. So in terms of how that flow of material works, I as a consumer might go buy a piece of packaging. I will then dispose of that in my household waste. That will be collected either by a contractor or a council, and then that will go to a recycling facility, and that recycling facility will either recycle it themselves and generate a PRN, or they might export it for recycling overseas, which obviously, as I said, is something we're keen to try and move away from and move more towards UK sourced recycling. But ultimately, at the moment, the UK doesn't quite have enough capacity to recycle all of its own waste, unfortunately, which is something we're trying to change. So in terms of changes, there are some massive legislative change on the horizon at the moment. So currently, this system that we operate to, it's called the Producer Responsibility Packaging Waste Obligations. Now, the UK is planning on implementing what is referred to as an extended producer responsibility system, and that's meant to come in by the end of 2023. What we mean by extended producer responsibility is that companies handling packaging, placing it on the market, will ultimately have to pay the full cost of the collecting, sorting, disposing, and recycling of packaging waste. So all of the collection costs at the moment for household waste would be picked up by a local authority. So the council tax payments will fund that. What we're talking about here is a movement to, if I'm a business and I'm selling stuff under my brand in the UK as a brand owner, I will ultimately have to pay whatever it will cost for the equivalent material to be collected, sorted and recycled. So whilst that is a massive implication in terms of cost, it will also, in theory, mean a lot more recycling gets done. And really importantly here, that there is a concept which the EU have started implementing in various nations over there of modulated fees. And this is something that the UK is definitely going to be moving ahead with. What we mean by that is, you recall I mentioned that each material has its own stream, so paper, plastic, aluminium, etc. We're going to be looking much more in detail at each packaging type. So currently, if I was a business and I put a plastic bottle on the market and also a toy box with a PVC screen, plastic bottle made of PET, really, really easy to recycle, high value once it's been recycled, recyclable item. PVC panel in a toy box, really low value in recycling. To be honest, most likely going to be sent for incineration or unfortunately landfill. So those two at the moment both get defined as plastic. Under a modulated fee system, they wouldn't. So the PET bottle would have a cost for being plastic, but then that would be reduced compared to the PVC on the basis that the PVC is harder to recycle. So we're moving to a system where recyclability is considered really important for the costs that businesses pay. And for household packaging, ultimately, those payments will be going straight to local authorities. And within this as well, another interesting point is there's also a litter payment. So litter of packaging will also be covered by businesses. However, as with all things, there is a cost. And really, this is split out into three areas. So for household packaging, this is going to cost businesses £1 billion a year. For non-household packaging, around £1.5 billion per year. And then for the litter payments, £200 million per year. So overall, we're talking £2.7 billion cost per year to businesses placing packaging on the UK market. Now, the PRN system that we operate at the moment runs around £250 million in comparison. So we are talking about a tenfold increase in costs. And if you work that out per household in the UK, roughly around £100 per household in terms of increasing cost of the actual packaging related to products that are purchased, which I think we've accounted for is effectively a 0.6% increase in the cost of all household packaged goods. So it's equivalent in effect to 0.6% inflation for household goods. So the financial implications are significant, but theoretically the recycling implications and the opportunity to capture waste that otherwise would go for incineration and landfill is also quite significant. So in terms of consumers and how this is going to impact, everyday people, primarily costs. We will see that, those goods increase in cost. I had to say, unfortunately, having spoken to quite a few local authorities, and this may not come as a massive surprise, despite the fact that that money will be going into local authorities, it is not expected that council tax rates will decrease. So council tax rates will likely stay the same. But on top of that, there'll be this additional payment. So it will be interesting to see how that gets balanced out. We might actually see more funding being diverted towards non-waste causes as a result of this. However, in terms of recyclability, packaging on the market in the UK is, from 2023, I expect going to be considerably more widely recyclable. And anything that's harder to recycle is either going to be reduced or ultimately replaced because the costs will be so significant. Access to recycling will go up massively. So we expect there's a separate measure, which I'll touch on the next and final slide, on consistent collections, which will basically encourage local authorities to all have to collect a minimum standard of recycling. And ultimately, what money does go through to councils and local authorities will be based on performance. So it can be expected that we'll see a lot more work being done in terms of litter collection, curbside quality of recycler, and actually more frequent collections as well. So in terms of those other legislative changes, I just thought it was worth touching on these because they're all kind of linked. So first of all, from April next year, the UK-wide plastic packaging tax is coming in. So anyone placing plastic packaging on the market, which has less than 30% recycled content, is going to be paying a £200 per tonne cost. So we expect that to help drive the secondary market for plastic material. But there are also, implications there for plastic packaging in terms of its cost. Deposit return schemes. So from July 2022, this is a proposed date, unfortunately, it's not yet finally confirmed, but Scotland will have a deposit return scheme for drinks containers. So every time you buy a bottle of pop or something, or a can of pop or bottle of wine in Scotland, you'll pay 20 pence, which you can then get back when you return the empty container. I'm aware this is something that's been around previously in the UK, and it's something that there's a lot of public drive for, and England, Northern Ireland and Wales are expecting to have their equivalent from 2024. And then finally, consistent collection scheme. So from 2023 to 2024, this is England only, unfortunately, but all local authorities will have to collect as a minimum glass, paper, plastic and metals. It is separate dry waste collection from the curbside, and then also food and garden waste collections will be free. So for anyone who lives in an area where they don't offer food collection, charge for garden waste, or don't collect any of the glass, paper, plastic or metals at curbside, this is really good news. As you can see, that there's a lot of changes on the horizon, and I think in 5 years' time, if all goes to plan, we could have a very different dynamic for what you can dispose of in your household waste. And I believe that's the end of my slides.
Thank you so much, Martin. That's really useful, and it's really great to give everyone a bit of an overview of what's kind of going on and what's happening. And really, really interesting. I think it's really trying to shake up the system, which should be certainly. I look forward to having a bit of discussion on that after the next speaker, and we can maybe touch on a bit more on that. So that's great. So thanks a lot. So I'll now pass on to our final speaker, which is Ugo Vallauri. He's the policy lead and co-founder of the Restart Project. I'm sure he'll talk to you a little bit more about what the Restart Project is. They're looking at trying to change the way we look at our relationship with electronics, and looking at encouraging our electronics to last longer, and looking at issues around barriers to repairing our electronic items. So really, really interesting kind of things, and there's lots of really exciting changes coming forward as well for electronic waste. So I'll pass over to Ugo, and thanks a lot for joining us today. It's really great to have you here.
Thank you, Greg, for the invitation, and good morning, everyone. I'm just going to share my slides. Can you see them now? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks for the introduction. And I want to start from two of the things that we've been observing now for many years, and are at the heart of why we started back in 2012, before we became an organization, to run community repair events, very much similar to the ones that Margaret and others are running in Chesterfield today. And I noticed that you are coming back with an event on the 17th of July. Same day, there will be a first event back in London as well. Fingers crossed. It's great to be talking about this at a time when it's becoming possible again to bring people together to repair things. And yeah, why did we start? We started because we felt that, just as Wally witnessed, we lost our collective muscle for repair and for understanding. We're surrounded by more and more electronics and other products that are very convenient in our lives, but we don't necessarily understand our relationship to them, and we don't control these machines. Often we don't know how they're made inside, what's inside them. How can we be in control of how long they last? And in fact, we tend to be very, very frustrated about certain products, and printers are really good examples that seem to fail unexpectedly but surely at one point, and the frustration and the um, incentive to actually make them work again rather than replacing them is very, very little. But repairing together is a wonderful way to think differently about how we consume products in the first place and how we can use skills that still exist in all of our communities to rethink the way we approach the issue of maintaining and keeping things in operation, and whether we need new things when instead at times we can indeed repair them, and it can be fun and a learning experience, not just the right thing to do. We are a registered charity based in London, which indeed is looking at fixing our relationship with electronics and bringing repair more visibly out there, documenting how repair can work and should work. Um, I know today's topic is around the circular economy, and the circular economy is used too often to mean things that are not exactly the kind of future that we want to see happen. We want a future where recycling is indeed the last option. Of course, it's important to recycle products when it's the real end of their life, but there's many other things that are in the so-called inner circles of the circular economy that we should be focusing on a lot more. And I'm sure we'll talk in the Q&A later about the example that Rosemary brought up inevitably around Amazon. But I'll just say for now that the biggest outrage from us, we knew this is happening for a long time, but the biggest outrage is that even the response from the environment minister is, yes, we should make sure that they recycle things. And yes, we should recycle things, but not brand new things that perhaps have not been used yet or that could be reused. Anyway, we'll come back to that. But we want to see a complete change of the system. And in order to change the system, the pressure from communities such as repair cafes and the likes is crucial, but we need to change much more than the way that you and I fix our own things. And the reason for that is indeed that when you look at the most ethical choice when you're buying a product or the most environmentally friendly one, the reality is that more often than not, it is the one that you already have. And that's because when you look at the amount of electronic waste that we generate in the UK, it's per person the second country in the whole world. But let's not get fooled by the fact that others are producing quite a lot of waste as well. The problem is in the column on the side of that, which shows how big the amount of e-waste produced as a whole by the country is, and also how our collection of electronic waste is a lot behind other countries. And so Norway produces even more than the UK, but they're at least better at collecting it and processing it. The problem with the devices that we use and that we continue to buy and refresh too frequently is not just the weight of the waste produced, but it's all the hidden impacts, all the other aspects that go from mining all the way to the energy intensive aspects of manufacturing the components for our products, the assembling of the products. And we still need to learn and to pass on the notion that the vast majority of the greenhouse gas emissions for a lot of the electronic devices we use occurs before we've ever switched them on. So in other terms, this is not the very latest version of the iPhone, but the numbers have remained the same. Approximately 72 to 80% of all the greenhouse gas emissions linked to one product occur before that product has ever been switched on. And that means that the only way we have to reduce our impact is to use the products for longer, and so that we reduce the pressure on manufacturing products. Notably, also, those emissions are not counted in each country's overall CO2 emissions. So the manufacturing emissions of all the products that we import are not factored in when we're looking at the overall environmental footprint of a country. So basically, we have a very skewed perception of the progress we're making in tackling climate change and net zero targets if we're not taking in consideration all the impact of everything that we import from abroad. So to make it even clearer, this is something we just published about the impact of the way we use laptop computers. So you see that if we replace them every 4 years and that product stops being used, the overall impact jumps high every 4 years when a new product is manufactured. While in essence, these laptops can and should, absolutely must be used for much longer. And that's why people who consume products, but also visit repair cafes and repair events and buy secondhand products and try to maintain the products that they have for as much as possible, are doing the only right thing to do right now. I mean, of course, we can concentrate on ethical practices by specific manufacturers, but the real message is that we should be buying less new products and trying to keep the products we have for a lot longer. Linked to that, there's the issue that we are pushing ahead as much as possible at the moment, which is the issue of our right to repair, which over time has shrunk and is constantly under threat in terms of having affordable access to spare parts for everyone, so that we have a real incentive to repair rather than being told that that's a mantra, which isn't necessarily true, that it's cheaper to buy a replacement product than repair an existing one. It's not necessarily cheaper, but when people talk about planned obsolescence, it is indeed a plan by manufacturers to keep the price of spare parts high and to make it hard to replace specific components, so that indeed it's more convenient and at times almost comparably expensive to buy a new product as opposed to repair one. This is a slide from the European Right to Repair campaign, which we are running alongside other organizations from across Europe, reminding us that products should be designed well so that it's easy to keep them in operation for longer, that everyone should have fair access to spare parts and repair information, not just professional or authorized repairers, and that we should have informed consumers. So people, when they buy and become consumers, should be able to assess whether a product is repairable to begin with when they're buying it. This is not the case right now, where a lot of the information isn't clearly accessible and there's plenty of information asymmetries. So it's hard to tell how expensive or feasible will be to repair a product. And this is a recent protest that partners of ours did in Brussels on printers, coming back to printers. And it's to protest the nonsense of voluntary agreements. At European level, there are voluntary agreements for some product categories, including printers, whereby manufacturers come up with a proposed new regulation to increase the environmental sustainability of their products, and then it's agreed and monitored by officials at the European Commission. Well, it's telling that the manufacturers are not making sufficient progress and are not operating in the interest of people and planet. For example, the most recent version of this agreement, which is still a draft, but it's telling, is wouldn't require manufacturers to make spare parts available for any printer that costs less than £300. So most of the printers that you and I would consider buying, and of course I try not to print to begin with, but if you do need a printer, you would like to have the confidence that you buy a product that will last, and that if you have a problem with it, it can be fixed. So this shows that basically we need real regulation that will shape the market and the repair economy in ways that are in the interest of people and planet. We cannot let manufacturers choose on their own terms what makes sense in terms of environmental sustainability. It seems quite obvious, but it's good to be remembering this from time to time. The interest and excitement that is all over around community repair, and I'm sure we'll be back the moment we can run many events again, busy as they used to be, shows that people really do want to extend the lifetime of products, and there is a thirst for keeping products in operation. And it's not just us. We've collected with partners from all over the world, including Transition Chesterfield Repair Cafe. We recorded data from all the attempts at these events, almost 50,000 repairs that have been done at community repair and events. And we have data on these barriers, and it shows that there is a very, very wide range of products that are people attempt to repair, and we are successful, and you see the green parts of the bar chart, but we need to be able to repair a lot more, and there is no country anywhere that is coming up with sufficiently ambitious regulation that will cover all the range of products that we are seeing at these events. And the UK public definitely wants government to take action on repairable products. I mean, it's the same in every other country, like at the EU level, at US and Canadian level. Like there's been really strong bipartisan support for this kind of measures, but it's simply not happening at the speed that we need it. And at UK level, the most prominent report that we've seen and that we were lucky to collaborate on bringing our own evidence on was a few months ago from the Environmental Audit Committee, which came up with very strong ask to enshrine right to repair in legislation in the UK. Unfortunately, the government response to that report was not as ambitious as we would have liked to see. This is a set of proposals, and some of them have been dismissed. And on other proposals, there's quite a slow progress. Our work in this area has been going on for a while, and back in 2018, as part of our Fix Fest UK, like a gathering of repair volunteers and activists from across the UK, a Manchester Declaration was written that many groups have already signed up to, and I invite you to read it. If you haven't heard of it yet, you'll find it easily at manchesterdeclaration.org. But basically, we need a lot more, because these issues, particularly in the context of everything else that regulation-wise needs to happen now that the UK is finding its own space post-Brexit, these issues are not given sufficient urgency and weight and time. And that's why Restart has come up with a petition to ask for a real right to repair in the UK. The reason is that you probably heard that the government is bringing right to repair in legislation, and indeed it's coming as of the 1st of July. But what's happening is simply that the UK government has translated into UK law something that they had already approved 3 years ago at European level, which brings some initial but very, very mild, important but mild changes in terms of ensuring that for some product categories, washing machines, dishwashers, fridges, and TVs and other screens, some spare parts will have to be made available for at least 7 or 10 years after the product is taken off the market. But they will have to be made available primarily to professional repairers and not to everyone. And it's a very important step, but it's a very first step. And we lack commitment from the UK government in making repair affordable and accessible to everyone, requiring repair information and parts to be available for everyone, not just for some repairers. And we need commitments for all products to be covered by right to repair legislation, and starting with smartphones, laptops, tablets, products that at the EU level, there's already work ongoing, but still zero commitment from the UK government on acting on these. And particularly in a post-Brexit scenario, why not removing VAT on repairs? There's zero VAT on the repair of yachts in the UK. Perhaps we can do it for laptops as well. We have a petition that you can sign if you like and share if you feel like it's important on our website. And I look forward to discussing more in the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hugo. That's really, really, really fantastic. And yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of things going on that, and it's a lot of hard work they've been put into try and push for that. And I hope we can kind of get somewhere with it now moving forward. So, so I'm aware we've got about 35 minutes or so for questions. And I know if anyone's got a question at all, if you want to type Q and the question into the chat box, and then we'll come to you with any questions. But I know Lisa submitted quite a few questions, and I don't know, Lisa, you can kind of maybe, if you want to choose what question you want to start with, perhaps, and if you want to ask that, if you want to unmute and come on and ask a question.
Yeah, sorry, I won't ask all of them. I'll just start with one. But thanks to all the speakers. That was really inspirational. Thank you. I'll start with the one for Rosemary, but others can chip in, which is just about the construction industry, really, because they're responsible for huge amounts of waste. A lot of it's sort of high embedded carbon. And there's, you know, I know people in the building chain, there's massive amounts of waste of, you know, useful materials, bricks left over or whatever. You know, and what's the possibility of, you know, zero waste construction? You know, I have seen zero waste contractors, but you know, what's it going to take to drive that particular innovation?
Probably customer demand. I think construction industry are well aware of their issues. I mean, certain products, thinking here about Saint-Gobain, who make plasterboard, they have for the last few years taken back plasterboard to recycle it and reuse it. So there is interest within the sector, certainly. Some housing manufacturers now are looking at doing construction in a different manner. So they're actually making parts of the building in a factory and then shipping them out. So they're not using the traditional brick design for construction, which again saves materials, saves time on site, which of course is a cost to businesses. So I think construction are well aware of their issues, but they probably also need their customers to say, this is what we want. And I think that goes for a lot of sectors.
Could I just come back on that, Rosemary. You know, I mean, I'm not going to be buying a house for like, you know, the next 50 years maybe. You know, doesn't government and local councils, can't they play a part? You know, can't councils put in their local plans, you know, requirements that all housing developments should be zero waste? You know, I just think a bit of responsibility from the policymakers rather than requiring all individuals to, you know, to take responsibility. A bit like the whole repair issue. Yes, we can do stuff as individuals, but really, you know, we're kind of, we don't have the power.
That's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think we actually have a lot more power than we think we have. Because obviously governments are elected by us, councils are elected by us. So we probably have a lot more power than we give ourselves credit for. But yeah, I get your point that governments need to stand up and need to take action on this. You know, we can't carry on as we are. We know this. 5-10 years down the track, we might be sitting here going, well, we did know, but we didn't do anything about it, which would be absolutely appalling if we got into that situation. We have to do something now. The science is telling us that we have to step up, and whoever can make an impact, whether it's a local action group, the local councillor, the MP, somebody has to be doing something.
Can I jump in actually on that as well, Rosemary? Do you mind?
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
from my understanding, alongside the extended producer responsibility for packaging, there's a couple of other measures. So government has committed. So currently, producer responsibility exists for packaging, waste electricals, batteries, and end-of-life vehicles in the UK, but they've committed to bringing in additional measures for other items. So on the horizon, we've got fishing equipment is going to get an extended producer responsibility. Now, construction waste is going to get some form of extended, but we have absolutely no idea from government yet as to how it'll look. So hopefully there will be something like that will come in that will force businesses who produce that waste to pay for its disposal. But unfortunately, at this point, I think it's tied between. So textiles is going to come in legislation within the next 2 years, and then after that, fishing equipment, construction waste, and tires are all kind of vying for a position as to what the next one will be. So I think actually it is probably a good time to be lobbying government and saying you need to deal with this, because it puts it to the top of their agenda for one of the next EPR measures.
Definitely. Is there I know there's the environment bill that's going through Parliament at the minute. Is there any way to kind of have it put into that at all?
The environment bill has been going through Parliament for seems like the last 5 years now. But yeah, there's an opportunity to kind of push for it within that. So I think the EPR measures for the kind of non-packaging stuff has been pushed through. I think it's in the environment bill, and I also think it's in a separate circular economy commitment that DEFRA have made as on behalf of the government. But at the moment, I mean, I think Ugo made a really good point about it as well. Legislation is just far too slow at the moment for anything waste related. So yeah, it's and resource related actually as well. But yeah, I think lobbying as much as you can is always a good idea.
Yeah, thanks. Ugo, do you want to come in and say anything on following that?
Yeah, well, you know, now in terms of waste prevention, so from our side, there's just been a consultation that just ended for DEFRA, and you know, our response was that we need to have real targets for reuse of products so that we don't just end up glorifying recycling, for example. It's an interesting moment because there's finally a different perspective, not just for people that care for the environment, but I think thankfully due to what happened particularly with the most recent lockdown and the homeschooling, when it comes to reuse of computers and other products that can keep us connected. There's been a moment, a reckoning of how we can't just wait till the government buys millions of new laptops, but there's many that are going to waste every single day. And so we're seeing some initial interest from some waste authorities to actually try to filter out products that should be reused and repaired, and not counting them as targets for their waste collection. So I'm hopeful that we can make more progress, but at a legislative level, yeah, things are just simply too slow. And I remember taking a picture in 2012 of a waste recycling center in London where people were smashing completely reusable laptops and as they were taking them to be recycled. Sadly, this has been happening for far too long. And hopefully between the outrage regarding the Amazon story and the realization that we have over 1.5 million children that didn't have access to a computer, this is going to help us make more progress than just the realization that environmentally this is simply unacceptable. So perhaps we need to strategically talk in different ways so that the different types of interest become united.
Definitely, yeah. I think it definitely. I think yeah. I think the thing about the Amazon scandal thing is that sort of is it kind of just, it just highlights the issue, and I think it's good that it's come at this time because it can really start to kind of put pressure on the government to start thinking about this issue. Yeah, it just feels like it feels like this exposure for Amazon has kind of come at a good time to sort of expose the situation and show and put pressure on the government to start thinking that they really need to kind of take the situation seriously and start thinking about the amount of waste that's kind of generated on this kind of level. So I think, yeah, it's kind of frustrating it's happened, but it's great that it's kind of happened to highlight just the situation, and hopefully it will really start to put the pressure on to really start looking at tackling this issue at a wider level. So Laura, did you want to come in and say anything? Because I think you've put a couple of questions in the chat about fixing things, or secondhand phones and all that kind of thing. Do you want to come in?
Well, I wouldn't. I just worry that there are enough people. It's not something that colleges look at, is it? Is that we've become a throwaway society over the last sort of decades, and I worry that has become the norm. I mean, I hate it. I hate it with a vengeance. And I've been plodding on with my laptop for so long, and I've got a rubbish phone, and I'm getting told off at work all the time. Well, access emails, oh no, I'm talking to somebody and they say, well, can you email me that? Actually, I'd just like to talk to you now about that. I don't want to go home, access my computer because I haven't got a laptop at home because I'm just a TA, and then tell you on the phone, via email, what I can tell you now. And I'm getting so cross about it because I've got this slow laptop that I use OpenOffice, and because I use OpenOffice, I can't always access the documents that you want me to look at, and everyone else has got a fancy phone and they always look at their fancy. I don't want to buy a fancy phone. Why should I be forced to buy a fancy phone just so that I can do what you access an email that I can tell you the information that you want me to give you now? And my blood's boiling, and so what is this? What is this ridiculous world that we find ourselves in? And I don't know. We need to have courses for young people on how to fix things before we can go forward with all of this, because nobody knows how to fix anything. They're all made to break and not be fixable. So legislation is absolutely the way forward. It has to be legislation, and it has to be quick. And I'm just becoming more and more despondent when I hear how slow the progress is. But we need people like Martin and Ugo to drive these things forward, and it's all extremely interesting. And I thank you for this, giving me hope. giving me a
Can-
hug.
Can
And
I?
I will, and I actually refused to do what she said. And I said, may I tell you now? Oh, I'll write it on a piece of paper. I'll write it on a. Can I give it? I'll give it to so-and-so to give to me.
Can I jump in on this one, Laura? Because so one of the things from a circular economy perspective, that I can completely understand the frustration. And one thing from a circular economy perspective that when you do like a bit of, I guess, in-depth reading on it, one of the things that kind of really jumps out to me about how we can move to a more circular system is that we look at the way that we buy and use products, and really there's two kind of core definitions you want to look at. So there's a product-based approach, and then there's a service-based approach. And so product-based approach, is the situation that has led to, like you say, being when you've got a laptop that struggles to work, and then everyone's wanting it to be in line with all the newest technology, etc. Well, the service-based approach is actually a way around that to some extent, and it is something as a society that we've have some ability to do. And I think for cars it's something that a lot of people do, so leasing something rather than buying it. But I have seen over the last few years that for technology, this has started to become more and more of a thing that people are interested in. Why should you have to buy a new product when, in theory, if you leased it off a company, paid a monthly fee to utilize it, and then they would repair it if it breaks and fix it, etc. I mean, the same thing could be said for white goods, for any household appliances. That the service-based model really is the perfect way to try and address those issues, because ultimately you're as consumers, we're not naturally gonna, we buy technology for it to make our lives easier. We don't buy it so that we can then, when it goes wrong, have to know loads and loads about repairing it. So that's exactly why stuff like a repair cafe is a brilliant idea, because it gives you an opportunity to lean on the expertise of other people. But yeah, I do think there is a massive opportunity for service-based models for technology. I mean, for mobile phones, most people actually have their phones on contracts anyway. But if you compare the contracts that someone would have a mobile phone on compared to what they might for leasing a car, they're completely different. There's no servicing, there's no, what happens if it goes wrong? We've kind of forced ourselves as a society down this route where everything is about buying the item, owning the item, and then if something goes wrong, well, you either find a way to fix it or chuck it. And that's absolutely not the right way to go. But I mean, would you consider, so if there was an option for you to lease a laptop, or because realistically for work purposes, it's something that work should be able to provide, which then when something goes wrong with it, the people who made it are the ones ultimately that should be able to fix it. Is that something you'd consider as an alternative?
Well, we are. I mean, how old is this laptop? It's really not that old. Is it 6 years old, or maybe 7, maybe 6 years old, 5 years old? That is old. Well, it's not old, is it? Of course, it's not old. So I've had it fixed once, but maybe twice. But yes, it would be something. But then again, where we live, is it easy to find somebody? How does that system work? What would I have to do? Where would I have to take it to get it fixed? So the whole load of other stuff then comes into play, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
my daughter's just she's got a phone and she's had it fixed twice, and I'm really pleased that she actually paid quite a lot of money to have her phone fixed, and she's done that on 2 occasions, and I feel really quite proud of her that she's done that. Can I just butt in? I'm going to put a link into. There was a really, really brilliant program that has just been a new David Attenborough. Does anybody know about it? It's not a new David Attenborough. It was just been. He was obviously part of it. It's all scientific based, and ultimately it ends in it's really doom and gloom, teary, and then suddenly at the end it's all, we're going to fix this. science-based, but it basically comes down to the circular economy. I'm going to put a link in. It was Netflix launched last night, and it was I found out about it because my husband works county council, and each department has a rep on the climate in their climate for the climate, not the committee, but a climate group. They have a rep for climate, and he's the rep. So yes, breaking boundaries. Catherine's put it in the thing. So so I watched it last night, and I don't know if anyone can watch it without Netflix, but it kind of was doom and gloom until the very end, and then he's talking about circular economy, and I suddenly thought, circular economy, oh well, circular economy, tomorrow's Zoom. And I thought, well, maybe, who knows, and about the UN Security Council ultimately needs to sort the whole world out, because that's what it's about, securing our planet. So I'll put the link in anyway. Did you watch it, Catherine?
Ugo, you come in on this.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to this exchange, because I think Laura, you're absolutely right that repair can be sometimes complex and frustrating, and that's exactly why we need regulations that requires the products to be easier to disassemble design wise, and access to parts and manuals be easy for everyone. This will in turn not only make products easier to repair, but also create more opportunity around the repair economy, because for some products it's not viable right now to have repairs commercially. Like we see that all the time. If you look at the graph that I showed earlier around the range of products that are brought to repair cafes and the likes, shows that there's a long tail of products for which there wouldn't be any viable repair alternative, commercial repair alternative. And we need to change this and make it possible for more repair to happen, not just at community level, although of course we want more communities to be involved, but not everyone will be able to attend the repair cafes, but repair should be the norm for everyone. In terms of jobs, certainly laptops are still, and anything to do with mobile phones and tablets, we see that as part of the repair economy that's doing relatively well compared to other products. We see a decline for things like televisions that seem to have become more throwaway products. And again, that's something that is not okay. On that front, we should also be looking at how the push of advertising has actually continued to make us desire TVs that are a little bit bigger every time, and with even higher definition, higher and higher, which by the way also increases the cost, the environmental cost of streaming all the products that we watch through all platforms. That's another parallel conversation. But I think that all in all, there's a lot more opportunities that can be created with green repair jobs if we create the conditions by making products more repairable, and the fiscal incentives such as reduction of costs via reduction of VAT, for instance. On the point of the leasing, I think it's an interesting model. However, let's keep in mind that there are some products for which you don't probably want or need to lease it. Like, we see examples of companies that have come up with leasing model for headphones, for example. Sure, if you look at the actual cost, if you model it over a year and a half, which I will hope that's you want to keep the product for longer than that, then the cost starts becoming really high. And so it makes you wonder, is this designed for people that want to have one product and keep it for long, or is it designed for people that kind of want to keep upgrading, moving on and on frequently? And I think we need to question a little bit what happens during these with these leasing models. Are the manufacturers going to have all the right incentives so that they don't just try to get you to upgrade more and more, and instead keeping you to use the same product for longer with good servicing. I think this is one of the tough questions, which the circular economy tries to be all very cool about. And yeah, it's all going to be okay because in the end, someone else will use their product. But the stats that I showed earlier about the actual impact of the products pre-use is something that we cannot just forget and magically just think that the circular economy will fix it all. Slowing the consumption cycles of people that are consuming too frequently, too quickly is an aspect that cannot be downplayed.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. And Rosemary, did you want to say anything on that?
Again, I mean, yeah, repair's great, and leasing, yes, I like the idea. But again, as with Ugo, I would be worried about the costs. I'd be worried that if you're paying, you know, £50 a month to lease your dishwasher, you know, you could end up paying thousands just for the secure knowledge that somebody will take it away and upgrade it. You know, washing machines can last 25 years, or they used to be able to. Now they probably don't. This design for end of life idea is not sitting comfortably with me. I do think the electronics companies have a responsibility, and I think maybe they need to work with organisations such as Ugo's to discuss this. If we look at Apple products, you can't open them up. There's no way you can repair them. You know, this needs to be addressed in some way, but I'm not sure that leasing is the way, because I think it will end up costing the members of the public more money than it needs to.
I mean, you can repair the Apple products. You still can, and that's something that we shouldn't forget. However, part of the push that we're seeing happening, and the example of smartphones, particularly the Apple ones, is quite worrying. Is that as regulation will inevitably come in, and we've seen a draft, and there's an ongoing conversation at the European level, at least. Regulation will require them to make more parts available to professional repairers, definitely a lot more than they're available now. But we see the trend of including new software barriers so that only with the approval of the manufacturer, you'll be able to fit in a part. And so in a way, the manufacturers might control completely the process, which in a sense is similar to what Martin envisions with leasing, but to the advantage of whom. So it's in the interest of whom. So for instance, you could be in a situation where a manufacturer makes available the replacement screen, but makes it available at a price point which might still make you consider an upgrade instead, and might otherwise put a barrier so that if you put a replacement screen which is made by a third party, you'll get a persistent message that this is not a good part whenever you switch on the phone. So this is happening, that's already happening, and we're trying to find ways to remove this from future legislation, but it is a really complex world out there.
Can I just very quickly, sorry, because I know Laura's got her hand up. If I could just quickly say on that, there is a consultation expected imminently from DEFRA. It was meant to be out this month, but has been pushed back to July, on the future of the WEEE regulations, or the Waste Electrical and Electronic Equipment Directive. Now, I've been to a few workshops that DEFRA have run on that, and one of the things that we kept coming up against is there is a want from government to have some form of modulated fee structure. So like I discussed with the packaging, based on recyclability, but a modulated fee structure for waste electricals, which would not just account for recyclability and would actually try to bring in some form of circularity within that. The problem with that is that electrical equipment is incredibly hard to try and categorize based on its circularity. And I know historically we've had I think it's the RCI, the Circularity Index, which has looked at it. I know iFixit have a repairability score, which is another mechanism. The problem we kept coming across was, how do you actually have a measure of repairability? So what my suggestion was, we could do it based on warranty lifespan compared to the average of that category. So laptops, phones, washing machines, etc., compared to each other, average lifetime of the product, expected warranty versus are there parts available for purchase that are spare, and ultimately what is the kind of mean lifetime of that product. But the problem you get into there is there's so many different types of equipment that, I mean, in the current dynamic, we split waste electricals into 14 categories. And it ranges from large household appliances through to then there's categories 2 to 10, which is small mixed we, which is makes up a bulk of that. And there's so much in that. There's everything in that, from toasters to laptops to phones to so trying to categorize it and break it down is much harder. In terms of, and I know repair is absolutely, should always be the priority when it comes to electrical items. But one thing I did wonder, just to check the room on this, because there's a project we've been working on around return of items. How many people here are aware that when you purchase a new item, a new electronic item, you are entitled to return what you're replacing it with to the place of purchase? We've got one hand up. Okay, 2, 3, 3.5, 4. So when you purchase an item, you are entitled, if you buy it in store, you're entitled to, within 2 weeks of that purchase, return an equivalent item. Now to most stores. Starting from next year, it will likely be every store, including online retail. And also, if you go into a store which has, I believe it's over 200 meters squared of electrical sales space, you can return any items of what we refer to as small mixed we, so anything less than 30 centimeters, you can return them without having to purchase anything. Unfortunately, 99% of the population are not aware that that is a thing in regulation. Now, the other issue that we have that kind of tags onto that, and it's a legislation one again, is we've had so much confusion over the last 2-3 years with DEFRA around where you define something as waste and where you define something as a resource. And what we've had is a lot of people and a lot of businesses as well have had this. They get returns in, and unfortunately, if they're classified as waste, before it can be reused, it has to have undergone some form of review by someone who can say it is fit for reuse. And that fit for reuse thing is something that in legislation is really, unfortunately, not well designed, because you end up kind of forcing your hand to categorize stuff as waste when it could be a resource. And this was made even worse when we did some research, discovered that there are a lot of persistent organic pollutants in some of the older waste streams. So in the plastic components of I think it's pre-2008 items, you quite often get these POPs, or persistent organic pollutants, which are basically flame retardant chemicals that are very, very bad environmentally and in terms of being toxic as well. You cannot recycle or reuse anything which has POPs in because of legislation, which means that if you suspect it has a POP in, you cannot reuse it and you cannot recycle it. So that is another kind of like legislation loophole where it's just, like you say, it's not designed to promote reuse. It's designed to promote the simplest course of action. So we're hoping that with this consultation that will hopefully come out next month, DEFRA will have a lot more clarity in terms of how they're going to push for a more circular system when it comes to waste electronics.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Martin. You certainly have a lot of knowledge that's very, very useful to need to kind of get out. Laura, I know you've been waiting for a while to come back.
Well, I can't remember what I was going to say now. No, it's just all these knowledgeable people. It's the problem is that there is so much complacency. If I went to a shop, I absolutely see that someone would say, "Oh yes, thank you very much," yeah, and then they chuck it in the bin.
Yeah.
Because there's no incentive. There is no incentive. So unless there is because of the climate, because of all the CO2 impacts of a phone or of a whatever you want to buy, I think what we should do is have a carbon price added onto whatever it is we buy. And if you add this kind of special price thing, and then you'd be more encouraged to buy. So it's like a tax. And then that tax could go to the government for dealing with CO2 emissions, or it could go, ultimately as consumers, we should be, that would put us off. And I know it's not going to work, I know, but it's like, having a credit card, a carbon credit card, where we're all given amount, like in the books. I don't know. It could be. I don't know what an answer is, but there's got to be some answer. And we as consumers, we ultimately, people just want more. Kids want, I want this. I've got the new this. And Apple, we're doing their newest phone. Whoa! Great big palaver, great big like the whole world is celebrating. The queues go around the block 1,000 miles. All the news that it's on the news, what's that about? Let's twist it round. And everybody, we all have a responsibility, but it's not working, is it? It's not working. So anyway, I'll shut up now.
Thanks.
Greg,
Yeah, go on.
Just super quickly, I wanted to respond saying that Martin, you mentioned how hard it is to assess repairability, and it used to be hard, but it's not as hard anymore. There's in France since January there is a repairability index score for 5 product categories, and it's been already extended to more. So it's not perfect, but it shows that it's possible and that companies are responding in 2 ways. One, by having to admit that certain operations, for example, disassembly of their phones in the case of Apple, is really hard. They got a very, very low score on that. And others, Samsung, are starting to make repair manuals for their French products sold in French available on their French website in an attempt to increase their repairability score. So the system can change. I'm not suggesting that this is enough of a change, but it shows that it's possible to make repairability something that manufacturers will compete towards if you create the right incentives and if you make it visible for people at the purchasing point. So it's possible to change, and the UK, we've recommended it before to DEFRA. The UK absolutely can learn from what's happening in France. It can be adopted also just tomorrow for next year. It can be done. It's not impossible. And manufacturers, the moment it's become a requirement, they find a way. It's not impossible at all. We don't, as people and consumers, have all the power that we need, and it's not enough to rate on length of warranty, because warranties doesn't mean that the product will just simply be swapped for another one and not repaired and just recycled. So if our goal is to ensure that products don't get recycled until it really is needed, we need to create a set of incentives at government level so that this becomes the norm.
Thank you so much, Ugo. That's really great, and I think I think it's really important to end on that on that kind of positive message. I know Rosemary put in the chat about how frustrating all of this, but people are beginning to listen, and it's changing hearts and minds, and changes will happen. And I think that's really important, and we need to end on that positive kind of note. And just before we finish, I just want to bring Margaret in just to say any last few words or anything about what's happening in Chesterfield and what's just kind of give us.
Yeah, I put stuff in the chat. We're holding a market stall next Saturday for people to come and talk to us about repair, and hopefully we can inform a few people who might not come across it otherwise and sign the petition. And as Lisa's put in, the next repair cafe is on the 17th of July. It's appointments only at the moment, though.
That's great. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for everything. And I just really want to say a huge thank you so much to all of our fantastic 3 speakers, Rosemary, Martin and Ugo. And it's really great to kind of have this discussion. And obviously this discussion's recorded, so we'll be uploading this into YouTube, and we'll be writing all this up, and we'll circulate all of that once we have it. So it's really great to have all of you here today. We've got our next countdown to COP session on the 31st of July, and it's going to be tree planting, carbon capture and flood prevention. So that's on the 31st of July. And so, but I just want to say thank you so much to everyone for coming, and I'll stop the recording, but thanks so much for everything, and thanks everyone.